Hi, Natalie Brynne here. This video is made to accompany your bonus PDF guide entitled Avoid Wasting Time or Money, Tips for Finding or Maintaining a Quality Instrument. This video won't be replacing what you can read in the guide, but it is a bonus to demonstrate examples that you actually need to see or hear so that you can better judge the quality of instruments you're thinking of purchasing or already own. I'll cover 4 things in this video. First, how can you inspect the interior of an acoustic piano that you are thinking about purchasing? Second is whether your acoustic piano is in tune or out of tune. If you are using an acoustic piano in this workshop, then this will be important for you to know, because sometimes people think their piano is in tune, especially if you've barely had it tuned naturally, but there are a couple reasons why it still might not be that we will get into. We want to see if your piano will sound at the same pitch as mine in this program so that you will be able to play along with me in trainings or play along with the backing tracks later on with no problems with how it sounds. And thirdly, we will look at different levels of quality in keyboards and digital pianos in the areas of touch sensitivity on the keys and weighted keys and why they're preferred. First, we'll look at an upright acoustic piano and how to check for damage. Obviously, if it's a grand piano, you can just open up the big massive top and look down into the strings. But with an acoustic upright, usually it will have a lid on the top that can open. Be very careful because they're very heavy. So what you'll want to do is look down inside, inspect every string, and see if it looks like any are rusted or damaged in any way. You'll want to inspect the hammers with the felt around them. These are actually what hits the string and makes the sound, so you'll want to make sure, try every note and make sure that the hammers aren't disintegrating or falling apart in any way and that everything's working. You'll also want to test the pedals. This is what a practice pedal looks like. Only certain pianos have them, but it puts a layer of felt in between the strings and the hammers so that you can actually practice quietly when the middle pedal is held down. But again, not all pianos have this. When you press the pedal on the right, it's called the sustain pedal, and you'll see all these little hammers here by the strings. They'll come off and they'll make the strings ring out. So make sure that's working. Lastly, sometimes this front piece can come off on pianos, but if you're at somebody's house looking, just make sure they know how to do it. It's kind of awkward to try and rip into their piano if you don't know how it works, but at least you can usually look down into the top. Like I said before, not every piano will be easy to figure out how the front comes off, and you'll want to definitely get permission from the piano owner, but sometimes you can take off the front piece and it's really cool to see how it all works. But each key is actually hooked to these long wooden pieces, which then raise the hammer, which then hits the strings. It's really quite elaborate how these are made. So it's a nice view to look in there and see how everything's laid out and if you can spot any damage in there as well. Next on the video, we'll look at how you can actually remove this panel right here that's on the very front of the piano. A lot of pianos, you can look behind this and see. So here's this metal thing that holds it in with felt on. You can press it up and then you can see how we can start to move this. Carefully move it and set it aside, and I'll be back to show you how it looks. Okay, we are in. Isn't this fascinating? You can get a great view of each string and whether it's rusted or damaged. You can really get a great view of the wood and whether it had a water level line or any other damage in there. The metal frames that hold the strings, just look at everything and make sure nothing looks loose or broken or off. We have our pedals in here and they are all hooked up to all their components and these pulls that lift up and work with the hammers inside the piano. And here is our middle practice pedal. So let me show you how each pedal works. And each should have a little resistance and not feel just loose or like they're not hooked to anything. So this is our sustain pedal. You can see it's pressing up the pole on the right. It's the one we looked at before that makes the notes ring out and sustain. If your piano has a practice pedal, it will have this little left-hand chunk that you can slide it in so it will stay that way while you practice and allow you to practice softly. It's a nice feature, but when you press it, see, that's how that one works. The one on the left is a soft pedal. So when you press it, it puts the hammers a little closer to the string, allowing you to sound a little softer. It won't sound anywhere near like the middle practice pedal, but it makes it just a little softer. So you can see how I have my acoustic piano, my digital piano, and then my keyboard all lined up to show you some differences. First of all, my acoustic and my digital keyboard, you can see they both have the exact same amount of keys, 88 keys, whereas a lot of keyboards don't have a full keyboard. They don't have 88 keys. They can have different numbers, but you can definitely still learn on a keyboard, preferably that has 54 keys or above. We're going to learn right now how to find a note called middle C, and we'll use that one note to test and see if your piano is sounding in tune with it or out of tune with it. Other notes on your piano can definitely be out of tune besides middle C, but we're just going to choose that one for now to test. So how do you find middle C? You'll notice on a piano how it has 2, 3, 2, 3 black notes all the way across. We're just going to ignore this single black note on the left. So what we want to do is we want to count 4 groups of 2 over, and then we'll find middle C. So we have 1, 2, 3. The 4th group over, it's usually under the logo on an acoustic piano. The note to the left is middle C, to the left of the 2 black notes. Sounds like that. And so the same on a digital keyboard, the 4th group of 2 over. You see how they sound almost identical? Ironically, my acoustic piano is being tuned next week, so it's just a tad off for those of you with a very discerning ear. But you can see how it sounds almost identical. And then on the keyboard, you won't be able to count the 2 groups over because it doesn't have the 4 groups, but you can usually tell if it's like under the screen in the middle or an logo in the middle, just whatever one looks like it's in the center of the piano, the group of 2 that sounds like this. It won't sound high or low like that. It will sound like that. Now your keyboard and your digital piano are already programmed to have the right sounding notes, so you don't even need to worry whether they're going to sound right with the workshop. It's the acoustic piano that can be the stinker that might be out of tune. So next I'll show you how to tell. Hey, so I'm going to show you on this keyboard that has a pitch bender how a piano could potentially sound depending if it's barely out of tune or a lot out of tune. I've pre-recorded into my digital starting at middle C and playing the next 4 notes up towards the right, so it will sound like this. And I'll show you that compared to some notes that might be out of tune. So just listen this first time and see if you can tell how it sounds off or different. So that's a little flat. See, it just sounds almost like another note. So if it doesn't sound the same, you won't have the benefit of practicing with me or playing with the backing track because it will sound kind of sour or off like it just barely sounded. Now, if you're next to your piano, I'm going to start at middle C and play those same 5 notes. I'll do it 3 times so you can really get in and test yours and see how it sounds. Now, one thing to make sure of is that you don't have the little gear settings underneath this video sped up because then it won't sound right. So make sure it's just playing at normal 1x speed and not either slowed down or sped up. Okay, so here, starting at middle C, I'll do it 2 more times and you can see if it sounded right on with your piano or if your piano sounded off. So keep in mind that we only tested a few notes. Sometimes there may be other random notes on a piano that have really slipped, but the other notes still sound great. So you might have some like that on your piano. And by the way, it's okay if your ear couldn't tell the difference very well yet either, because your musical ear can actually develop over time the more you play. So if you can't tell right now, you don't have to stress. Here's a quick note. If you have had your piano tuned recently, but it still doesn't sound like mine, then you will want to read the section in the guide about a double tuning. If a piano is really old or really out of tune and needs a big pitch raise, then sometimes in order to not damage the strings, some piano technicians will tune a piano to itself for the initial tuning, so it still sounds better. It will sound much nicer than it did, but it's still not tuned the rest of the way up to where it needs to be, which is technically called A440 or 440 Hertz. So in this case, a tuner will usually try to schedule the next appointment in 1 to 3 months after the piano has been able to settle into its initial tuning for a while, but some people don't choose to pay to have it tuned again that soon. So if this was the case with your instrument you're using, then it may still sound different than mine too, even though it has recently been tuned. But don't be discouraged if you find your piano is out of tune or isn't exactly at A440. You can either schedule a tuning soon or see if someone you know has a keyboard that you can borrow during the workshop, or see if you can go to someone's house that has a tuned piano during the workshop. Just keep going on what you have and learn all you can now. You can always go back later once you have something better. Next, we'll talk about keyboards and digital pianos, and you will soon see that they are not all created equally. So let's start with an acoustic piano. We could already say that an acoustic piano is touch sensitive. If you touch softly, it plays softly. If you touch loud, it plays loudly. You can sound musical and start off soft and get louder. Or end softly. A digital piano, for the closer you can get to the feel of a real piano, the better off it's going to be. And on a digital and a keyboard, obviously the sounds are pre-programmed in, but the more sounds they have programmed per note, the more loud and soft options you'll have. Do you see how I can play it soft or loud? I can grow in loudness or get softer. It has a really nice sound. And a keyboard, some of them don't have many sounds programmed in. This one's on the cheaper end, but it still does a pretty good job of having touch sensitivity for the notes. Now the other thing that you want to look for is whether it has weighted key or not. Some pianos are just, the cheaper they are, the more plasticky the keys are. So to test this, let me turn off this piano and this one, and I'll show you just if we play with the sound off, how plasticky these keys seem. You can hear how they make a little plastic noise, kind of. And then on this one, where the keys are a lot more weighted and made to feel more like the feel of a real piano, they don't just have that give, they have more resistance like a real piano key has. And so you'll be able to develop more control. Whenever I play this keyboard, which is on the cheaper end, sometimes it's hard to have the control, and my hand will flip off, or it will play one note really loud while I'm playing like a really fast section of a song, because since they're not weighted and they don't really have a lot of substance, your hand has a harder time having control on it and making the song sound really good. So now you've seen the different levels of touch sensitivity and the weighted feels of these three different pianos. Now something to keep in mind is if you have a toy piano, a little keyboard from a toy store, they often will only have one sound pre-programmed into each key. So you'll
no matter how hard you try, you'll basically sound robotic when you play because there's no way to make it musical and loud and soft. It'll just kind of be like video game music where it's one level the whole time. Next, if you have a very cheap keyboard, a bad habit that students can get into is turning it down very softly. I've already turned this one way down. And since it's so soft, no matter how loud you play, some students will learn to pound where they're just putting unnecessary force. But they can't tell because it's already quiet. So then when they actually move to an acoustic piano, it doesn't sound very musical because they've learned to put so much force on the keys. So sometimes that's a bad habit that can transfer over if you don't have a high quality keyboard and you keep it down quiet all the time. So it's a good idea to practice with it at regular levels, and we'll go over in class how to not put too much force onto the keys.
To sum up, start with what you have. Almost any keyboard or piano can get you started, even if it's the toy pianos we talked about from the toy store. But as you get more advanced and as your ear gets more developed, you will want a plan in place to get something higher quality. I hope this has been helpful for you to understand some of the differences in the wide variety of pianos available to you out there.